So Warren Buffett, one of the smartest investors ever, basically says you only need to be invested into one index fund overall. But whenever you hear about, for example, all the fancy investors out there, they tell you no, you should be invested into America, into the small companies in America, invested, for example, into international companies, emerging markets, into bonds, into real estate. There are all these other investments that you actually need to be invested into. However, though, if the best of all time says you only need one, why would the rest say no, you need a lot more? And by the way, that investment is basically the S&P 500, and the concept is simple. Instead of picking, for example, just one or two or three companies, right? Big companies, why not just pick the 500 largest ones that account for 80% of all the output of America? And by the way, when you think about the 500 largest companies in the US, they're really more like the 500 largest companies on the planet. Because we do so much business. Amazon sells everywhere. Apple sells everywhere. Tesla is selling cars, not just in the US. Microsoft sells everywhere on this planet. So the idea is, well, I'll talk more about that later in this video because I'm getting too excited. But the point is, that's the only investment you need to make. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly why that is, what broker to basically use, how much money to invest, and why you don't need to invest into everything else. So I hope you actually enjoy this video and actually helps you and actually gives you value. As always, guys, like this video on top of also subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified. Now, the very first thing, guys, is Tommy, all right, why is the S&P 500 so important, okay? The answer is because basically it accounts usually like for almost all the output of the stock market overall. Because these 500 companies are so massive and so big, they basically overtake everything else, okay? That's the point. Now, when you invest into these companies, the big deal is that, by the way, the big deal is very simple. You're basically investing into the American economy. So when you invest into these companies, you're placing a bet saying, I think that America is going to be better off in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years whenever you actually plan on retiring. It's that simple. And back then, back in the day, like really back in the day, like 1896, I think it was, yeah, you heard me right, 1896, when they actually used the Dow Industrial. Back then, the Dow was like, I think like 66. And today is like 29,000. By the way, the Dow Industrial is also an index, but it's basically for the 30 largest companies in the US. And it basically has doubled back and forth, and made so much money because in reality, American business overall has grown massively. So this bet that we're placing saying, hey, we think that America is going to do great over time. So what's the point of investing into all of these other places? Now, I'm going to tell you exactly where this concept actually comes from, because here's the next question. Well, if I only invest into the American economy, what if America doesn't do that great? And that is the question of diversification. And by the way, when you invest into 500 different companies, you are diversified. Because all those 500 different companies are, for example, in different industries. They all get taken apart in different ways. For example, if Apple is down this year, it doesn't really mean, for example, like a candy company might be down also. You see what I'm saying here? So in reality, you are diversified. But the big deal is if the overall US economy is down, you're going to see that if you're just investing into the S&P 500. So the reason so many people tell you, hey, you need all these different investments is to create this whole thing of modern portfolio theory. And the idea is simple. It's having a diversified portfolio globally, in a sense, where you have the US, international, real estate in there, emerging markets, small cap. And this way, if one sector is down, the other is up. And it creates this whole thing where if the market is down 10%, your portfolio might just be down 5%. You really don't see it that much because overall, you're more diversified. But here's the problem, okay? Because when you are investing into all of these different companies and so on, usually it means a lot more fees, okay? Second, it also means, for example, you could just be better off as far as gains in the future just by being invested into the S&P 500. Because when you give up, for example, risk, you're also giving up returns. And when the idea is, I just don't want to see this and this and this happen in my portfolio, it doesn't matter if you're investing, for example, for the long term. Because over time, whether it's up or down, doesn't matter because you're planning to take that money out years from now. That's the point. So you don't really need to say, I need to be fully diversified, because if the market is down, I don't want to see that much of my portfolio actually go down, right? That's not necessary. But if you are in retirement, then that's a different conversation, okay? However, number 3 is worst case scenario, Tommy. If I'm only invested in the US, doesn't this put me at risk that if something happens to the US, like I'm also gonna be like terrible? The answer is yeah, but the odds are like close to 0%. And the only way that happens is, nuclear war, something crazy happens. And if that happens, like honestly, like your money and my money, like it don't matter at that point, right? It doesn't matter what you're invested into anymore, because when you have, for example, a planet that's so interconnected in the sense that if we do terrible and our currency goes down, it probably implodes China, right? Like things are just connected like that. And I don't really understand it fully, but the overall idea is that we're so connected to the point where if we go down, a lot of people go down, okay? So it's like if that happens, nothing matters anymore. And at that point, markets just don't care, okay? So the risk is like, the risk is like, the world is done. So it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? So you don't really need all of it. So tell me, where are the base places for me to go ahead and open up today a brokerage account to invest, for example, into the S&P 500 if that's what I actually want to do? The answer is simple, okay? I'm going to tell you something. I use right now M1 Finance. Currently, I'm still using it, but I am considering switching over somewhere else, and that is over to Vanguard. And I'm going to be honest, okay? M1 Finance is a great company. It has good customer service. It's been around for a little while, but overall, they manage about like $4.5 billion. And that sounds like a lot of money to you and me, obviously. $4.5 billion, there's a lot of money, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, but not really. I'll tell you why. And Robinhood is not the place, because Robinhood is more, for example, like for active traders, back and forth. A lot of gambling and then dumb stuff is going on there, by the way. But overall, you're looking at, they're managing around $98 billion, okay? Wow, that's a lot of money. The answer is kind of, but not really, okay? Here's why it's not a lot of money. Because the company I'm going to recommend, which is 3, by the way, you're going to have Vanguard. Vanguard has been around since, for example, I think over the past 40 years. They manage around $8 trillion. It's a lot more money. And they have super low fees and great customer service and a great track record. So that's why I'd rather put my money with this massive company that has a lot of money, and the odds of them going down are very slim. And you might say, Tommy, well, all these other companies, they have, for example, insurance too, like up to 500K, so what's the big deal? The answer is yes, but I'd rather not even want to go through anything like that if something does happen. Okay, so Vanguard is the first one, and you can invest into the index, for example, VFIAX. Let me do it again. VFIAX right here, and that is the S&P 500, or you can do the ETF, which is basically VOO. Now you might be wondering, Tommy, what is the difference between an ETF and an index fund? The answer is one is closed-ended and one is open-ended. Don't get confused here. It's very simple. A closed-ended fund, it kind of has, for example, like, it's like in the stock market. It's being traded. So you have a fixed amount of shares. So the only way to sell your share is to sell it to somebody else. So if the stock market is going crazy and selling off, you will see a lot of declines, which I love because it allows me to take advantage of people being scared. However, open-ended fund, for example, like the index, for example, the idea is whenever you invest money, you're buying directly from them. And whenever you sell, they have to grab your share and basically liquidate it and give you cash, okay? So the fund can go to zero if everybody sells. But if you're buying the ETF, it's basically just consistently switching around from seller to buyer. That's the whole idea, and the difference between an open-ended fund and also a closed-ended fund. If you don't understand it, play this part back. Just watch it a few times until you actually do, okay? But it's very simple. Now, number 2 is Fidelity. Fidelity, I love. They've been around for a very long time, longer than Vanguard, like over 70 years. They have very low fees. They're trying to compete with Vanguard. So right now, their fees are around 0.015%, while Vanguard is around 0.04%. And I'm talking about, like, the difference is, if you have $1 million, Vanguard charges you $400. If you have $1 million, they'll charge you like around $150. Like, it's very minimal difference, okay? It's like a massive amount of money to make an actual difference. But overall, I love them. They've been around for a long time, and they manage around $11.8 trillion, like a lot of money. And their index is actually FXAIX. By the way, what's the difference between this index and the other index? The answer is there's no difference, because an index is just a company that has a few managers and they invest into those 500 companies to try to mirror exactly what the index is actually doing. So no difference at all. Like, it's the same exact thing, the same results, okay? So you don't have to worry about that. And lastly, you have Charles Schwab. Charles Schwab I actually like because they're a lot more modern than Fidelity and Vanguard, and I might consider them also because, again, it's no big difference. But overall, they do manage around $610 billion. They're the third largest index fund provider, and they've been around for over 30 plus years. So all of these companies right here, they're very trustworthy. They have very low fees, and that's what you really care about. Although the smaller companies, like for example, the robo stuff and the apps, they're pretty cool. They're very fancy. They're on your phone. They're cool stuff. But when you're talking about saving your money for years and years to come, you kind of want to have it in a space where you're like, okay, I'm not really worried about this whatsoever. So what's the strategy here, Tommy? How do I go about this? So if I do pick, for example, Vanguard, how much do I invest? How frequently do I invest? How do I do the whole thing? So very simple. Let's say you have Vanguard. And by the way, I recommend that you invest into a Roth IRA. Like, for the average person, a Roth is the best way to go if you can actually qualify for one, if you don't make that much money. But the Roth is perfect. Like, you can invest up to like $6K a year. So that's around like $500 a month. And my rule is very simple, that you don't want to, like, just keep your investments to like 10 to 20% of your income. So if you're investing $500, divide that by 20, you're going to be making around like $2,500. If you want to do more money investing, the answer is simple: max out your Roth, and then go into, for example, your 401k match, and you try to max it out also, like the actual match. So they tell you, I'm going to give you 10K to match in total. Well, you invest until you get the max of all that free money. If you have any money left over, you can book that, for example, into a normal standard brokerage account. You can also do that, for example, with Vanguard or Fidelity or Schwab's. But it's that simple. So I would be basically saying, hey, I'm going to invest 10 to 20% of my money into my Roth IRA. When I get paid automatically, I'm going to send 10% into my Roth IRA to buy the S&P 500. That's the idea. It's that simple. By the way, remember, a Roth IRA is like a brokerage account, okay? When you have the Roth, you have to select your investment inside of it and actually buy it. So don't be sending money over there and leaving it there and thinking like it's growing. It's not going anywhere. You have to actually go inside and buy the investments. And yes, Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity, they all offer like Roth IRAs, okay? And talk to your job people, because sometimes they have you invested into a multitude of things, but if they give you free money, you can't really lose, because a dollar that I invest, they invest a dollar. Whatever stupid thing they're doing, it basically just cancels out. And whenever I'm done there and I transfer over that money to my normal account, I can basically just liquidate without taxes, of course, and put all that money into the S&P 500, and then boom, I'm good to go. That's the overall idea, guys. I hope this video makes sense. I hope you fully comprehend it. But the overall idea is the simplest saying: overall, the U.S. economy is going to do great. If we don't do that great, most likely it's not to be a good thing, okay? That's the overall idea, and you don't need to be investing into so many things, because overall, the fees just kind of eat you up in a way, all right? As always, guys, thanks for watching. As always, like, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, let me know this question right here. What is your favorite book of all time, okay? Just want to know that. Your favorite book, comment down below. On top of that, up here is another video. Over here is my face. Go subscribe. And as always, long-term team officially out. And follow me on Instagram at TommyBryson.